he had on the black satin Kung Fu uniform, and I walked in, and they were very welcoming, and I practiced, and I watched, and I watched him do this spinning kick. And for just a moment, he had both legs up in the air, and he was like hovering, right? He jumped up and spun around and slapped his foot, but he was up in the air like this. And I went, that's not quite jumping back 10 feet onto a roof, but it's pretty darn close. I want to do that.
Kia ora, welcome to the Invisible Sensei podcast. This is a podcast about my experiences as a martial artist, as a student, as a teacher, as someone who from time to time has stubbed their toes on the problems of the world and kind of gone, what am I doing this for? Please take time to check out the link in the description. It will take you to our YouTube channel and also to our profiles on social media, which you're most welcome to check out and contact us on. We also have a wonderful merch shop where you can grab cups and a couple of other things if you're wanting to support the podcast, or if you're wanting to support it more directly, we have a link that you can do that also. Either way, enjoy the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and keep training, keep smiling, keep enjoying, and most importantly, keep developing. Hey, kia ora guys, welcome to the Invisible Sensei podcast. And it's always an excellent opportunity and a nice break for me from hearing my own voice drone on and on and on when I can get someone that I've actually admired for a while on the podcast to give you the benefit of his or her knowledge. Today I am joined by Sensei Jim Alvarez. Sensei Alvarez is a senior Yudansha in Aikido, Shinkendo, and a bunch of other things that, experiences, life experiences, both in and out of the dojo that we're going to discuss today. Alvarez Sensei, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for inviting me and having me for this conversation. I look forward to it.
Likewise, Sensei. Now, the other day, we were discussing, in I guess preparation for this interview, I wanted to make sure that you were going, do I want to talk to this goober or not? So I gave you an opportunity. So I gave you an out, Sensei. So we've just got to continue going. We were talking about this unmotivated young child of the 60s who was somewhat of a globetrotter, not by his own choice, who walked into a Kung Fu Kun at a certain point. Can you tell us a little bit about that unmotivated young man and a little bit about your introduction and what changed about that young man the minute he started to experience martial arts?
Well, you talked about globetrotting. I was military dependent. My dad was in the Air Force. My first real experience with understanding a new culture was when we moved to Okinawa. And that's actually the very first time I saw martial arts. I got there when I was 10 and left just before I was 13. And they had judo at the local base gym. And I saw judo. It's real interesting. And being in Okinawa in the early 60s, there was one channel, the Department of Defense English channel, and a bunch of Japanese Okinawa channels. And that's where I saw sumo for the first time. So didn't really understand much about sumo, but it was another martial art. Eventually moved to Hawaii and saw more martial arts, but was not interested in actually training. As you said, I was an unmotivated child of the 60s, if you can maybe connect the dots. And there were some people in my high school that practiced. Some practiced judo. One mysterious woman practiced a Chinese martial art that we all assumed was deadly, that she could kill you with one touch. It was an amazing, very frail Chinese woman. I don't know where that story started. So then later on after high school, it was Bruce Lee. the David Carradine Kung Fu series started to catch my attention, especially the early Kung Fu movies where the Kung Fu masters could jump backwards 10 feet onto a roof. Boy, that's what I want to do. And so I remember the day I was working, and a friend of mine came up and he said, I went to a Kung Fu school last night in Livermore. I lived in Livermore. And I said, no way. He goes, yes. He goes, I'm going back there tonight. I go, I'm going with you. So we went to the school of Sifu, Bill Steele. Not a very big man, maybe even about my size, about 5'8". Probably at the time he was in his early 40s or so. And he had on the black satin Kung Fu uniform. And I walked in and they were very welcoming. And I practiced and I watched him do this spinning kick. And for just a moment, he had both legs up in the air and he was like hovering, right? He jumped up and spun around and slapped his foot, but he was up in the air like this. And I went, that's not quite jumping back 10 feet onto a roof, but it's pretty darn close. I want to do that. And I was kind of immediately hooked. And I was looking for something to mark my place in my family. My brothers were musicians. My older brother at that time played guitar, bass, and keyboards. My next younger brother was playing in the high school bands as a percussionist. Now he's a symphony percussionist. And my youngest brother, who I don't even know how old he was at that time, was being coached by my second brother in percussion. Everyone still plays music. My sister can draw just about anything or make any kind of art. My sisters, and somehow I missed that boat, and but found my calling, my something in life when I walked into that school. So I just continued to go back and train, and was just really hooked on the body movement. It wasn't a school where we went to tournaments and we did a lot of sparring, but we did a lot of forms, and then there was some weapons forms, some staff, and that was my my first journey on the Budo path, and I stayed with that for about 5 years, and then I moved from Livermore. I was always working in Livermore, but I moved from Livermore and started to commute, so it made it difficult to continue to stay with training. But I'd also started to go to night school. As I think I mentioned, I was an unmotivated child in the 60s, so I didn't immediately go to college. And so I was working at a national laboratory and surrounded by very, very smart people, and knew that if I did at least attempt to get just a little bit smarter, that I would continue to be the guy that moved boxes around, right? So so I started going to night school, and looking at the schedule, they happened to have Aikido, and I'd heard about Aikido. It's these joint lock things, right? There was a magazine at the time when I was taking Kung Fu called Inside Kung Fu Magazine. And they didn't just concentrate on Kung Fu, they concentrated on other martial arts. So I was introduced to, what Eskrima and Kali was. Mostly it was Eskrima. I don't think they called it Kali at the time. And Aikido and some other things. And so I had heard about it. So I signed up, and it was a 3-hour class, one night a week. And I'd go to the college and find a nice, quiet, shady place before class. And I'd go through my Kung Fu forms so that I I wouldn't lose them. And then I'd go to class, and I was much younger then. So, 4.5 hours of training wasn't totally out of the question for a 25-year-old or so, and 26-year-old. So it's just a bunch of beginners. So we were just doing a bunch of beginner Aikido stuff, and not really none of us having a real inkling of what is really Aikido. What is Aikido? So the teacher brought in a couple of black belts to demonstrate for us. So we're all sitting in Seiza, and so my eye level's about where it is now because I'm sitting on the ground. And so he threw this guy, and this guy goes sailing across my field of vision like Superman, right? And then he just goes, and he stands up and he turns around, and I went, oh. Again, that's not like jumping backwards 10 feet onto a roof, but that's what I want to do. I want to be able to fly like that just a little bit. And then, the throwing and the dynamics of the training, of course, kind of hooked me, but that's what really hooked me. And so, those two instances in my life where I experienced this new thing, walking into some place, right? Not knowing what to expect. It's like, choose to make a right or left turn, totally changes your life. So I eventually started training with Dang Thong Tri. He was a Vietnamese man in Sacramento. I was going to night school in Stockton, so it was fairly close to where I was living. But then classes for martial arts were stopped in the junior colleges, and I ended up traveling an hour back and forth to Sacramento. So at the time, it meant that much to me that I would commute home from my job in Livermore, about 40 minutes, eat some dinner, talk to the kids and the wife, get in a car and drive an hour to go train, be really tired, drive back, get home, relax a little bit, get into bed. So I did that maybe 2 to 3 times a week. If I was lucky, I would go on a Friday night, stay overnight, train on a Saturday morning. So my training wasn't every day, at least not with Tri Sensei, but I had some people around me that had areas that we could train in. And so that was my early career, coming up and learning Aikido, and stayed with Tri Sensei for a number of years, about 10 years. And then things happen, and you meet other teachers, and you start to experience what's on that branch over there on that Aikido tree, and what's on this branch over here on this Aikido tree, and what's that tree over there that's doing, a different martial art. Maybe I can come down off of my tree and go sneak up over there on that tree and see what's over there. So that's been my journey, searching, looking to enhance my Aikido and understanding of Budo.
Well, it's interesting, Sensei, when you put it in those terms, because when you were talking about how your family are all creative and all artists, well, I mean, it's martial arts, not an act of creation. I mean, your choice of medium might be a little bit different in the sense that the instrument that you play might be the kinetic force of other people, but I would class that. Together we class ourselves as artists. We're artists of a different kind, Sensei. Artists of a different kind.
I tell people that the only one that actually went to college and got a master's degree was my next younger brother, who is the symphony percussionist. My older brother didn't go to college, but worked for Apple Computer for 25 years. Was very high up in management for Apple Computer. My sister, she went and got an associate's degree later on, years after getting out of high school. And my youngest brother was a carpenter. So I tell people, like, we're not a family of intellectuals, we're a family of artists. So
that's a perfect thing to be. That is a perfect thing to be, Sensei. So when you started Aikido, what is something, I can really relate to what you're talking about, that gentleman sailing past you as he's thrown. I had the same reaction when the first time I saw someone double foot sweep someone. And I was the person being swept. And I remember just looking up at my sensei as I was sort of hanging in the air for that moment, and then came to sort of a terrible end on the floor. So that made an impression on me. What was it that, as I guess a junior Aikido practitioner at the time, a beginner Aikido practitioner, did you believe about Aikido that you have kind of, through decades of experience, kind of let go? Is there a particular thought or feeling or impression that you had at the beginning of your training that you don't hold on to anymore?
That was an interesting question, and it brought up a memory that I had. I don't know how long I've been practicing Aikido. Not very long, maybe 2 years at most, maybe. But had this fantasy that it was the ultimate martial art, that it could just do anything. It didn't really matter who you faced. Aikido could take care of it. And I was over a friend of mine's house, and I had walked in sort of right at the end of a professional boxing match. I can't remember who was boxing, but title. It was a title match. So, and I just kind of watched the last round, and I blurted out, well, if an Aikido guy had been in there, he would have won. And my friend looked at me like, he says, I don't think so, right? I go, oh, yeah, of course, Aikido. And now I know how ridiculous that sounds, because it's two different kinds of training regimes, okay? I don't know any Aikido person that trains like a boxer, right? That trains like an MMA person, that has the mentality of what an MMA or a boxer goes in to do. They're going in to hit you and knock you out, and they train to do that. And Aikido person doesn't learn how to fight. We learn how to move and stuff, but it's two different things, so no, I don't believe Aikido is the answer to everything, because and it all depends. Oh, how proficient are you? I mean, hey, I'm a boxer. Okay, I think I can take care of that. No, I'm a boxer that really moves and knows how to move their head, and has a, probably not. I'm probably going to get my clock cleaned. It's like kendo. So I have years of sword experience, but I'm fairly certain if I put on a bogu and a helmet and had a shinai, and I faced even a second or third, maybe even a shodan in kendo, I'm going to get nailed, because it's different, especially if I have to play by their rules. I have to play by their rules and go only for their point contacts and keep my right foot forward the whole time and things like that. No, I'm going to be confused. I'm going to try and do what I normally do and hit where I would normally do. And no, so give me a little bit of training, with the limited field division and this stuff on and these big gloves. Yeah, it would change, but it's you have to realize, I think, what it is you're trying to get from the martial arts you're studying, what's truly the overall benefit to your training. Does your training help you de-escalate something? Does your training help you go back and fix something that was messed up? Or does it at least get you thinking about, that social encounter was not the best. How can I fix that? How can I let my ego go if that's what's keeping me from, and all of that you can learn from martial arts, right? I'll gladly put on a bogu and a helmet, drop my ego out the door and go, teach me something, show me something that I don't know, right? Reinforce either the things that I do know, like, oh, I didn't do as bad as I thought. I only got hit 20 times, where I got a point a couple times. Okay, that's not bad. I've learned something, right? I've also learned that it's, again, two different things. A shinai is not a sword. Long answer to, I've discovered that all martial arts have their pluses and minuses, and that not one is the best for everything.